At Connection Church. I serve in the council and ministry. I don't know if you noticed when Andy was giving the announcements, he said at one point, we'll have a fairly normal service today, he said. I thought, wow, was that directed at me? Shots fired there. Huh? But seriously, thanks for Andy for better. Okay, yeah, we'll see about that. But I do appreciate the opportunity to bring the word to you this morning. Andy's done a great job leading us through the Gospel of John all the way from Christmas to Easter. So this morning we're going to do something just a little bit different. This morning I want us to think about a problem that we all face. Everybody in this room faces this problem. And that is the question of how do we respond? How do we deal with temptation that comes into our life? It comes into our lives in a million different ways and a million different things. But even though it comes in many different ways, I know that we all know what I'm talking about this morning. And how we respond and how we deal with temptation, at least for me, and I think for you, it's really hard sometimes. Isn't it hard? I don't know the particular temptations that you're struggling with today, but I know that you're dealing with them just as I do. Now, I'm no expert. I'm no theologian, but I am highly qualified to speak on this topic this morning, all right? I am a normal human being, and I think I know how it goes for us. For you, temptation, there are times where it is something new, where it's something maybe you've never faced before, and just maybe almost like the stars align. And there's this feeling of, wow, I never thought that I would be facing this, and now I am facing this, and it's something brand new to you. Temptation can also be something, frankly, that's kind of old, that you've been dealing with again and again for months or for years, and you ask yourself, is this ever going to go away? How am I going to keep facing this? But whether it's something new or something ongoing, when we're tempted, I want you to think about what your experience is. When we're tempted, I think that we're drawn in. We're enticed by temptation, and temptation looks very good to us. Temptation, at least for me, and I think for you, temptation is something I want, right? It's something that seems good to me. I heard someone say once, if there is a sin that you find repulsive, and I bet you could think about that this morning, that there are sins, there are things that we find repulsive, that doesn't mean you're especially holy. It just means you're not tempted by that thing, right? It's not very attractive to you. But the sin that we like, that's not repulsive at all, right? That's like really attractive. There's a reason that temptation draws us. We are drawn to it. So what are we attracted by? Well, here's the funny thing. I actually, in my notes, I made a list. I even Googled this week, what are the 7 deadly sins? Okay? And but the more I thought about it, I thought, I don't want you thinking about that this morning. I think you are well aware of what you're tempted by. You already know that. And so for us, the nature of temptation, the things that we're tempted by, can be a million different things, but regardless of the specifics, we're all tempted. Every day, every hour. Now, one thing I think I need to say here is, it's not a sin to be tempted, okay? To be tempted is a part of the normal human condition. But what I was thinking about this week, and what I want you thinking about is, the problem comes, I think, when we linger over temptation. We think about it. We want it. There's almost this sense of, I thought of resting, relaxing, indulging in temptation, just kind of letting it play in our minds. And what does that lead to? I think what happens, a result, the problem that happens for us in the midst of temptation is that we're drawn away from others and into ourselves. I want you to think about that. That's my experience anyway, and I think it might be yours as well. When we're tempted, at times we separate ourselves from others, and we're sort of drawn, at least I am, we're drawn into ourselves. And it's sort of narrowed down to us and our temptation. We hide. We withdraw. We kind of keep it within ourselves. And think about then the impact that has on you and on your relationships, your family. If you're married or in a relationship with your spouse, your significant other, there's almost a sense of in which, I'm being tempted. I'm gonna dwell on this. I'm gonna linger on this. I'm not talking to my spouse about this, or your parents, or your kids. It separates, or your friends, our closest relationships. What happens when we linger on it, when we respond that way, is that as we hide, we withdraw, we go into ourselves. Now, I don't know exactly how you're drawn away, but I just want you to think about the fact that we separate. We're isolated at times. We're alone in the midst of our temptation. But it's not just others. It's also, most importantly, we're separated from God. We drive ourselves away from God. Now, I suspect you're like me. As I thought about this, when we linger in temptation, we somehow manage to almost, at least I do, push God out of my mind. Maybe there's this initial battle for mind space. I thought of this really old example of Seinfeld, and there's this old Seinfeld where there's like evil Jerry and good Jerry sitting on his shoulder, and they're arguing back and forth. Maybe there's a little bit of that going on with us, an initial battle for mind space, but the longer we linger in temptation, I think the more we push God away. I'm not going to think about him. I'm not going to think about what he presents to me, what he's calling me to do. And instead, what temptation does, it ultimately, it represents a huge ongoing problem for us. The portrait that I've painted, this problem that we have, that you have, it can leave us incredibly discouraged. Temptation at times can be discouraging. Just to feel it coming on, to feel as though you have failed or that you're going to fail. And the question is, what can we do? Well, this morning, I want to encourage us because there is hope in the midst of temptation, and there is a path to follow as we meet temptation. And so this morning, I want you to open your Bibles. It'll be on the screen as well, to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and we'll be looking at verse 13. Now, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time for deeper context or focus on the passage as ideally we would do. But if you have a long exposure to the Bible, maybe you grew up as a child even memorizing this, 1 Corinthians 10:13 is not unfamiliar to you. It's a verse you might have memorized. And even if you're not familiar with this particular verse, that's okay. There's a good reason that people memorize it, but because it's a good one. It's a famous verse. But the power of this verse, of 1 Corinthians 10:13, I don't want you to think as though it's a magical incantation, all right? If I say this verse, or even if I memorize this verse, that's going to take away all temptation. I want us this morning to focus, even in this short verse, on the ideas that Paul lays out here in the Bible. What we have to do is we have to understand what he's saying, we have to believe it, and we have to apply it to our lives. So let me read the text here this morning. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. The apostle says, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind." What's common to us all. "And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." I'd love to unpack more of the context here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, but I don't have time this morning. But I will suffice it to say this. In chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul is being very hard on the church at Corinth, at least on some of the people at Corinth. And without getting into the details, Paul in chapter 10 is giving a very dire warning to these Christians. But in the midst of his dire warning, he stops right here at verse 13, and he wants to give some encouragement to the Corinthians. And he wants to give encouragement to you this morning in the midst of temptation. So this morning in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I want us to see 4 points, 4 lessons, if you will, from just this one little verse. So again, no temptation, his encouragement, no temptation has overtaken you except what's common to mankind. God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you're tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. And the first thing to learn this morning from our text is the temptation that you face, those things that you were thinking about in the last 5 minutes as I began this sermon, the temptation that you face is normal. It's common. That's Paul's first word to us. How does it feel that way when you're tempted? I would say it does not, right? When you're tempted, it actually feels unique. It doesn't feel as though, well, I'm just going through what everybody else is going through. No, it feels unique to us. This is what I am especially tempted by. It always feels to us as though the pull of temptation is unlike what anybody else experiences. And I want you to know that feeling, that this is unique. This is particular to me. That's exactly what Satan wants you to feel. Because he wants you to feel unique and alone in your temptation in order to separate you. Remember that, what I said before, when we're tempted, at least what I feel, and I bet you do too, there's this sense of withdrawal, there's this sense of aloneness in the middle of temptation, and he wants to separate you. He's like a wolf that's looking to separate out that one sheep from the flock. Or to choose another image from the Bible says that Satan is like a roaring lion going after his prey. And if he can make you think that you're all alone in this, that this is unique to you, that this is especially hard, then he can get you to yield more easily. Think back to Adam and Eve. Think back to Eve in the garden. When Eve fell as the very first person subject to temptation, Satan had her all alone. That is his practice. And so this morning, don't believe the lie of Satan. You guys don't necessarily know me very well, but if you remember, gosh, it must be 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Remember the old Saturday Night Live skit with Dana Carvey and Church Lady? And the church lady said, could it be Satan? If you don't really know me, but if you could get to know me, this idea of could it be Satan, there's a sense in which that's not the way I normally talk, okay? Some of you, that might be how you think about it. That's not the way I normally talk. As I got this sermon ready for the guy who doesn't normally talk a whole lot about Satan, I was just struck again and again. The wiles of Satan, the deceiver of our souls, our enemy, is out to get us in the midst of temptation. And we are so tempted. And so I say to us, to me this morning, do not believe the lie of Satan that you are all alone. There is no temptation that has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, what is common to all of us. And so the first thing to know is that you're not unique. Sorry, you are not special. Don't fall for his lie that this temptation cannot be overcome, that it is unique to you. It is common to the human condition. Now, at this point, if you think about it, you might say to me or you might say to Paul, so my temptations are common to humanity. Great. But what do I do about it? What do we do about our temptations? 1 Corinthians 10. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. So the second lesson this morning is the temptation that you face today is not beyond what you can bear. It's not beyond your ability. This part of 1 Corinthians, verse 13, why I chose it, why I'm preaching on it this morning, it comes out of my own personal Bible reading. I knew that I had to preach on this Sunday, so I've been thinking about it for a couple of months, kind of casting about what is it that I would preach on. And I was reading my Bible one morning, and I came to this verse. And the translation that I used said that he won't let you be tempted beyond your ability. And I thought to myself, ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I could preach on that at Connections Church. And then I told Andy later. Then I got to digging into it, and I thought, that was the only thing I had. He won't let you be tempted beyond your ability. We're just going to have a one-point sermon this morning, all right? That's where I was at one time. But it just struck me in the moment, that morning as I was reading it, that I always behave or think just the opposite. I believe that, honestly, you know what, this temptation, it's beyond my ability. I can't do this. This is too hard. Isn't that true? Whether our struggle with sin is short or long, when we yield to temptation, we say, this is beyond my ability, right? I mean, who hasn't been there? I can't do this. I'm just going to yield. I'm just going to give in. And that is another lie of Satan to you. This is too hard. I can't get through this. I can't get through this situation without exploding in anger. I can't get through this without lusting. I can't get through this without lying, without covering up, without making myself look good. And our text says this morning, he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Let me read the text again. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Did you catch that first part there? Paul says, God is faithful. 1 week ago, we celebrated Easter. We saw that God sent his Son for us when we didn't ask for it, when we didn't want it. He reached out, he sent Jesus to die for him, and he raised him last Sunday from the dead. The ultimate proof that he is the Son of God and that we have forgiveness by having faith in Jesus. God is for you, and he is for you, and God is faithful to you in the midst of temptation. So when I read this a few weeks ago, I have to tell myself, I have to realize, and I'm telling you this morning, the temptations you face are not beyond your ability. God doesn't permit that. Did you catch that in the text? God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. The text, another word, allow is a good English word. You'll see that in other translations as well. Just think about the fact, the temptations that come into your life, when there's that aloneness, when it feels like it's you and the temptation. In fact, we can think in our heads that God is a million miles away, but in fact, the text says it's God who's allowing it. It's God who's letting it into your life. God isn't tempting you, all right? That comes from evil. But God does allow temptation to come into your life. And the text says he won't let you. He won't allow you to be tempted beyond what you can do, beyond your ability. Take comfort in that in the midst of temptation. But it raises a natural question, doesn't it? I bet you're probably thinking it right now. If the temptation that God allows into my life isn't beyond my ability, why do I yield? Why is it so hard? And I think the answer is that we don't realize, and this is the third lesson from this text, we don't realize that for the temptation that you face today, there is a way out. There is a way out. No temptation has overtaken you except what's common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. You don't have to yield. You can endure. So why do we yield? As I was thinking about this, I think we yield because in temptation, it's back to that idea of being alone, right? In temptation, we can almost have this tunnel vision. And every other option, that way out, every other option is just wiped out. And all we see is just yield, give in, give in, give in. We're blinded with tunnel vision, and we think that there's no way out. But, says the text, Paul says, the temptation that comes your way is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He's faithful in this verse in two ways. They're sort of flip sides of one another. He won't let you be tempted beyond your ability, beyond what you can possibly endure. And when you are tempted, he will also do something. I want you to pick up on that. It's just one little verse. But when you are tempted beyond him not allowing anything into your life that you can't bear, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure. If you think about it, that last phrase is kind of funny, right? We would expect, and he will provide a way out so that you don't have to endure it, right? But instead, you get, he will provide a way out in order to endure it. So the message of the Apostle Paul, the message of God to us this morning is there is a way out. But once again, here comes the lie of Satan to us. The lie that we hear and the lie that I believe in the midst of temptation and that you are sorely tempted to believe as well. The lie is, I'm stuck. This just feels inevitable. This is going to happen, isn't it? And really what we're telling ourselves is, there is not a way out. There is not a way out. God's word to us this morning says, though, there is yet hope. There is hope for us in the midst of temptation because God is faithful. He is faithful. And so, the hope that you have, and you see it on the screen here, is the power over the temptation that you face today, it's not with you. The power over temptation is with God. There is no temptation that has overtaken you except that is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you're tempted, he'll provide a way out so you can endure it. Those two things at the end of the verse, they're grounded in the fact that God is faithful. God is faithful. You could easily hear this message today as everything you have to do, all right? There's no temptation out there that's beyond your ability, so you have to do it. There is a way out so that you can endure. That's in the text, but I could easily imagine you hearing, okay, I got to suck it up, right? I mean, I just got to try really hard. And that would actually be wrong. Remember, I said that in the midst of this passage, Paul is encouraging the Corinthians. He can encourage them and he can encourage you this morning, not because we're so faithful, but because God is faithful. He won't allow, he loves you too much. He won't allow you to be tempted beyond your ability. And the flip side, he will provide a way out so that you can endure. That's a lot to take in this morning. And there can be a sense in which it can feel overwhelming. Maybe you started this morning when we were talking about the ways that temptation affects us. If you're like me, you're thinking of your particular temptations, which are going to be different a month from now or a week from now. But today, you're facing what you're facing. And the question is, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with the temptations that come our way? For the umpteenth time, I want to read. There's no temptation, not one, that has overtaken you, except what is common to all of us. You are not alone in the midst of your temptation. You are not the only one. You don't have to say, this is so hard. If anybody could look over my shoulder, they would understand why I have to yield to this temptation. No, that's not true. The temptations that God allows into your life, they're common. That doesn't mean they're easy, but you are not the only one, and you don't have to withdraw, and you don't have to run. Secondly, God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond your ability, beyond what you can bear. We think, I can't do this. I can't possibly get through this. God says, in effect, don't worry. I'm not going to let temptation into your life that you can't bear. I'm going to allow temptation into your life that you do have the ability to bear. And I will provide a way out so that you can endure it. How do we know that? Because God is faithful. He's demonstrated it again and again to you, and he's demonstrating it to you today. He's demonstrating it to you this week. So what do? I want to just this morning give me an opportunity to reflect. Now, for some of you, probably for most of us, you might hear this sermon this morning and you'd think, great, too late for me. I already yielded, right? I yielded multiple times this week. The word to us in that situation is believe the gospel. Believe the good news of Jesus. Jesus already paid the price for your sin. And if you've exercised faith in Jesus Christ, you are forgiven. Confess and receive the forgiveness of Jesus. So I don't want you to miss that. But as we think this morning in closing, I want you to think about what is it that you're facing this week, that you're facing today? What is your temptation? And I want you to just meditate for a few minutes on the fact that the Lord is not going to allow you to be tempted beyond your ability. He will provide a way out. Why? Because He is the faithful God to whom we can run again and again and again. So Dan and Grace are going to come up, and I just thought it was so appropriate, that last song that we sang this morning, Run to the Father. Run to the Father again and again and again. So in the next couple minutes, while they play and sing, you can pray, you can reflect, you can sing, but I want you to reflect on this verse, that God is faithful. He is good. And the temptations that you face are not more than you can bear, because God is good, God is with you. And in those temptations, He's providing a way out. Maybe that way out even becomes clear in the next couple of minutes. So Dan and Grace are going to lead us, and then I'll close us out in prayer in just a couple minutes.